Chapter 1. The Knock on the Door. You never think something like this will happen to you. I certainly didn't. For 48 years, I lived on my own terms, creating a life that was mine and mine alone. I'm Carl Miller, a retired Army veteran who spent 2 decades serving my country. I've trudged through deserts, endured freezing rain, and faced challenges most people couldn't begin to imagine. But nothing prepared me for what was coming next. The day the HOA arrived, my world turned upside down. Before I tell you how everything unraveled, let me ask you this. What would you do if someone came knocking on your door claiming they had control over your home? Would you fight back, or would you comply? For me, that house was my sanctuary. It was my parents' home, a solid ranch-style house they left to me when they passed. I inherited it in my late 30s, back when my marriage was still intact and my children were just finishing high school. The house had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the roof sagged in spots, and the yard had become a jungle of weeds. But beneath the neglect, it had strong bones. I knew it had the potential to become something special, and I took it upon myself to restore it. Over the years, I poured my heart and sweat into that house. Every board I replaced, every coat of paint I applied, every inch of grass I mowed, it all meant something. This wasn't just a house. It was my home. My neighborhood was quiet, full of older homes and mostly private people. I wasn't the type to host barbecues or engage in long sidewalk conversations. A polite nod and a wave when taking out the trash, those were the extent of my interactions. My priority was privacy, and for the most part, my neighbors respected that. Or so I thought. Chapter 2. The Proposal. One afternoon, while working in my garage, I heard a knock on my door. Wiping the dust from my hands, I opened it to find a woman standing there, clipboard in hand, an overly bright smile plastered on her face. Hi there. We're organizing a homeowners association. It's a great way to keep the neighborhood looking nice and organized. We'd love your support. I gave her a measured look. A homeowners association? And what exactly does that involve? She gripped her clipboard a little tighter. Oh, just some basic rules, she said. Lawn maintenance, keeping fences in good shape, ensuring the neighborhood has a consistent appearance. It helps improve property values and fosters a sense of community. I let out a short chuckle. And who decided this was necessary? A few of us neighbors have been discussing it, she responded, glancing down at her notes as if searching for reassurance. We've already gathered a lot of signatures. Once we reach a majority, it becomes official. I folded my arms. So if enough people sign, you'll be making rules for everyone? She hesitated for just a second before her smile snapped back into place. Well, it's optional for current homeowners, she assured me. But new buyers would be required to comply with the HOA's regulations and pay dues. That should have been my first warning sign. The idea of newcomers being forced into this system while existing homeowners were supposedly exempt felt like a trick. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. I took the flyer she handed me, skimmed the promises of an improved community, and tossed it into the trash without a second thought. I wasn't about to pay money just to have someone dictate how I maintained my own property. Little did I know, that was just the beginning. Chapter 3. The Pressure Mounts. Weeks passed, and another flyer landed in my mailbox. This one was bolder, its message clear. Join the HOA and be part of something great. No thanks. But the pressure didn't stop there. My once quiet neighbors, the same ones who used to exchange little more than a polite nod, suddenly became eager participants in HOA meetings. Discussions about community standards and neighborhood improvement dominated the streets. Rules were quietly introduced, street parking was prohibited, trash bins had to be hidden from sight, and lawns were expected to meet a vague, arbitrary standard. I dismissed it all. I wasn't part of their organization. Their rules had no hold over me. Or so I believed. Chapter 4. The First Strike. It started with warning letters. At first, they were merely suggestions. Your lawn is slightly overgrown. Please maintain it to preserve the neighborhood's aesthetic. Then came the direct demands. Failure to comply will result in fines. I laughed. They had no legal authority over me, and I ignored them. But the HOA didn't take silence as an answer. The warnings turned into fines, each more absurd than the last. $50 for unkempt grass, $100 for visible trash bins, $200 for an unsightly vehicle in the driveway. My truck, the same one I'd owned for years, was suddenly an eyesore. Then came the threats of enforcement. Chapter 5: Escalation. I started seeing clipboard-wielding committee members walking past my house more frequently, pausing to take notes. My property had become a target, and they were circling like vultures. Then, one evening, a group of them showed up at my doorstep. A stocky man, wearing a polo with the HOA's logo stitched on it, stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, we're here to discuss your continued violations." I crossed my arms. "I'm not part of your HOA. Your rules don't apply to me." He smirked. "That's not how it works. You live here, so you must comply." I felt my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. "If you touch my property, I'll call the cops." The smirk widened. "We're just trying to help you, Mr. Miller. It'd be a shame if things got worse." With that, they turned and walked away, but I had no doubt they'd be back. Chapter 6: The Breaking Point. That night, I checked my security cameras. Sure enough, they were patrolling my property after dark, lingering near my fence line. The next morning, I woke to find a warning sign staked into my front yard. "Nuisance property, non-compliant homeowner." I yanked it out of the ground and tossed it into the trash. But the harassment only escalated. My mail was scattered across my porch. My trash bins were knocked over. Then, 2 days later, I came home to find my fence partially torn apart, wooden planks scattered as a storm had hit it. Across the side of my house, in bold red spray paint, the words "HOA rules" screamed back at me. I clenched my fists, my body shaking with fury. This wasn't just intimidation. This was war, and I wasn't going to lose. Chapter 7: The Counterattack. Enough was enough. If the HOA wanted a war, they were about to get one. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. Every harassing letter, every fine, every instance of vandalism, I documented it all. My security footage provided the undeniable proof I needed. Armed with everything, I paid a visit to my lawyer, a sharp-witted former Marine named Jacob Lawson. He didn't mince words after reviewing my case. "This isn't just HOA overreach. This is harassment and property damage. We're going to take them down." Jacob wasted no time filing a lawsuit against the HOA for unlawful fines, intimidation, and vandalism. The moment legal papers hit their desk, panic set in. I started receiving apologetic letters urging me to resolve matters amicably. But I wasn't interested in peace. I wanted justice. Chapter 8: The HOA's Downfall. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about the lawsuit. Suddenly, other homeowners started stepping forward with their own grievances. More security footage surfaced, showing the same so-called community officers harassing other residents. Then the media caught wind of the story. Local news crews descended on our neighborhood, shining a harsh light on the HOA's corrupt practices. The more people spoke out, the more their empire crumbled. The city council even launched an investigation into the HOA's finances, uncovering years of mismanagement and illegal collections. By the time we made it to court, the HOA was in shambles. Their lawyers tried to argue that everything they did was for the betterment of the community. But when confronted with hard evidence, security footage, financial records, and testimony from homeowners, they had nothing to stand on. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me damages for property destruction and harassment. Even better, the court declared several of the HOA's enforcement policies illegal. Fines were refunded, and homeowners who had been forced into compliance were finally free. Chapter 9: A Neighborhood Reclaimed. With the HOA dismantled, the neighborhood transformed. The once silent residents, now empowered, took back their streets. Gone were the ridiculous fines, the intimidation tactics, and the fear of clipboard-wielding enforcers. People painted their homes however they wanted, parked where they pleased, and lived without unnecessary rules breathing down their necks. One afternoon, Jim, one of the few neighbors who had stood by me, walked over with a grin. "Never thought I'd say this, but you saved the neighborhood." I chuckled. All I wanted was to be left alone. Jim nodded, looking around at the newly liberated community. Funny how that works. Epilogue: A Veteran's Legacy. Months later, I sat on my porch, sipping my morning coffee, watching as life in the neighborhood settled into its new, unregulated normal. I'd been through battles before, but this was one of the most personal fights of my life. I didn't just protect my home. I'd helped free my neighbors from a system built on fear and greed. As the sun rose over my freshly rebuilt fence, I allowed myself a rare moment of satisfaction. This was my home, and no one would take it from me again.